There is one habit, one single, ordinary habit, that steals vision from millions of seniors every single day. Not a disease, not genetics, something far more subtle, far more preventable, and far more invisible. And almost nobody knows about it. What if I told you that the answer to protecting your eyesight in your later years lies not in expensive treatments or complex medicines, but in something so simple, so ordinary, that you've probably overlooked it your entire life? Stay with me. When we talk about a single repeated behavior creating a cascade of biological changes, we are really talking about the principle of cumulative stress on living systems. Your body is not a machine that suddenly breaks down. It is an ecosystem of interconnected processes, and when you introduce a stress, even a small one, that stress ripples outward in ways that are often invisible until they become undeniable. The habit we are examining is sustained near-focus work without adequate rest, and what makes it so insidious is that it feels completely harmless in the moment. You sit down to read, or to work at your computer, or to engage in some detailed task that requires your attention, and there is nothing in that moment that signals danger. There is no pain, there is no obvious discomfort, and so you continue, hour after hour, day after day, year after year, never realizing that you are setting in motion a process that will, over time, compromise one of your most precious senses. The biological cascade begins in the ciliary muscles. These are the tiny muscles that control the shape of your lens, allowing you to focus on objects at different distances. When you focus on something close to your eyes, these muscles contract and remain contracted. This is necessary for clear vision at near distances, but it comes at a cost. Any muscle that is held in a state of sustained contraction experiences fatigue. The metabolic demands increase. The blood flow to that muscle becomes compromised. Waste products accumulate. The muscle becomes less efficient at its job. For the ciliary muscles, this sustained contraction is particularly problematic because, unlike the muscles in your arms or legs, you cannot simply rest them by putting down your book or stepping away from your screen. The moment you stop the near-focus activity, the muscles relax, but the damage, the accumulated stress, remains. But the ciliary muscles are only the beginning. When you engage in prolonged near-focus work, your blink rate decreases dramatically. This is a documented phenomenon in neuroscience and optometry. Your brain becomes so focused on the task at hand that it essentially deprioritizes blinking. You might blink 17 times per minute under normal conditions, but when you are intensely focused, that number can drop to as low as 5 or 6 blinks per minute. This might seem like a minor change, but blinking is not a passive action. Each blink serves multiple critical functions. It spreads a protective layer of tears across the surface of your eye. It removes debris and dead cells. It oxygenates the cornea. It provides a moment of rest to your visual system. When you blink less, you are essentially depriving your eye of these essential maintenance functions. For seniors, this becomes exponentially more problematic because the aging eye has already undergone significant changes. Tear production naturally decreases with age, particularly in women going through or past menopause. The cornea becomes less sensitive, which means you may not even notice that your eyes are becoming dry. The lens has already lost much of its flexibility, making the work of the ciliary muscles even more demanding. The retina has become more vulnerable to oxidative stress. So when you add the stress of prolonged near-focus work without adequate rest, you are placing demands on a system that is already operating at reduced capacity. The cascade continues as dry eyes lead to inflammation. Inflammation is the body's response to stress and injury, but chronic inflammation is destructive. It damages the delicate tissues of the cornea and the conjunctiva. It impairs the function of the meibomian glands, which produce the oily component of tears. Over time, this creates a vicious cycle. Dry eyes cause inflammation. Inflammation worsens dryness. Dryness causes further damage. And all the while, the person experiencing this decline may not fully understand what is happening. They simply notice that their vision is becoming less clear, that reading requires more light, that the world seems to have become slightly dimmer. The aging eye is one of the most fascinating subjects in human biology because it represents the intersection of evolutionary design and the relentless passage of time. Our eyes evolved over millions of years to serve us well during the span of a typical hunter-gatherer existence, which was considerably shorter than the modern human lifespan. An eye that functioned perfectly at age 40 was, from an evolutionary perspective, a complete success. But today, we are asking our eyes to function optimally well into our 80s and 90s. And this creates a fundamental mismatch between what our eyes were designed to do and what we are asking them to do. The changes that occur in the aging eye are not random or arbitrary. They follow a predictable pattern rooted in the biology of aging itself. The lens, which is the transparent structure responsible for focusing light onto the retina, begins to lose its flexibility starting in childhood. By the time you reach your 40s, you have probably noticed this change: the need for reading glasses, the difficulty focusing on close objects. This process, called presbyopia, continues throughout life. The lens becomes progressively less flexible, more dense, and slightly more yellow in color. This yellowing is not cosmetic. It actually filters out certain wavelengths of light, particularly shorter blue wavelengths, which affects contrast sensitivity and color perception. An 80-year-old's eye literally sees a different color palette than a 30-year-old's eye. But the lens is only one component of a much larger system undergoing change. The cornea, the clear dome-shaped surface at the front of the eye, becomes flatter and less regular with age. This changes the way light enters the eye and can contribute to astigmatism and other refractive errors. The pupil, which controls how much light enters the eye, becomes smaller with age. This means that less light reaches the retina, even though the retina itself is becoming less sensitive to light. It is a double loss. The eye is receiving less light and processing that light less efficiently. The retina, that remarkable tissue at the back of the eye containing millions of photoreceptors that convert light into neural signals, undergoes profound changes. The density of rod cells, which are responsible for vision in low light, decreases significantly. The density of cone cells, which provide color vision and detailed vision, also decreases. The macula, the central region of the retina responsible for sharp, detailed vision, becomes more vulnerable to age-related damage. The retinal pigment epithelium, a layer of cells that supports the photoreceptors, becomes less efficient at removing waste products. These waste products accumulate over time, forming drusen, small yellow deposits that are hallmarks of age-related macular degeneration. The vitreous, the gel-like substance that fills the interior of the eye, also changes with age. It becomes less gel-like and more liquid. Collagen fibers within it become less organized, leading to floaters, those small shapes that drift across your vision. More significantly, the vitreous can pull away from the retina, which can lead to retinal tears or detachment. The blood vessels that supply the eye become less flexible and more prone to damage. The optic nerve, which carries visual information from the eye to the brain, loses nerve fibers over time. What is crucial to understand is that these changes are happening simultaneously, in concert with one another. It is not that one thing goes wrong and that explains vision loss. Rather, it is a symphony of changes, each one making the eye slightly more vulnerable, slightly less efficient, slightly less capable of handling stress. And this is where the habit of sustained near-focus work becomes so consequential. You are placing demands on a system that is already compromised, already working harder to accomplish what it once did effortlessly. The eye that can handle hours of close work at age 25 cannot handle the same demands at age 75, not because it has suddenly failed, but because it has been systematically losing capacity for 5 decades. The concept of cumulative stress is perhaps one of the most underappreciated principles, in understanding how aging and disease actually work in the human body. We tend to think in terms of dramatic events, a heart attack, a stroke, a cancer diagnosis, as if illness arrives suddenly, like a lightning bolt from a clear sky. But the reality is far more subtle and, in many ways, far more revealing about how our bodies actually function. Most chronic diseases, most age-related decline, most vision loss that we attribute to the inevitable passage of time is actually the result of thousands upon thousands of small moments of stress, each one seemingly insignificant on its own, but collectively devastating in their cumulative effect. Consider what happens when you place a small weight on a bridge. That single weight causes negligible stress to the structure. The bridge does not collapse. In fact, you might not even be able to measure the stress with ordinary instruments. But if you place that same weight on the bridge every single day, thousands of times, year after year, something begins to happen. Tiny cracks appear in the concrete. Stress fractures develop in the steel. The structure becomes weakened, not because of any single event, but because of the accumulated burden of repeated small stresses. The human eye works according to the same principle. Every moment you spend in sustained near-focus work without adequate rest places a small amount of stress on the ciliary muscles, on the lens, on the tear film, on the retina. That single moment of stress is so minor that your body's repair mechanisms can easily handle it. But you do not engage in this behavior once. You do it hundreds of times per day. You do it every day of your adult life. You do it for decades. Over time, the cumulative effect of these small stresses exceeds the capacity of your body's repair mechanisms to keep up. The damage begins to accumulate faster than it can be repaired. This is where the biology becomes truly interesting. Your body is constantly engaged in repair and maintenance. Damaged cells are replaced. Proteins that have been damaged by oxidative stress are broken down and new ones are synthesized. Inflammation is triggered to remove damaged tissue and initiate healing. But this repair capacity is not infinite. It is finite and, importantly, it declines with age. A 25-year-old's eyes can handle sustained near-focus work because the repair mechanisms are operating at peak efficiency. A 65-year-old's eyes cannot handle the same demands because those repair mechanisms have slowed down. The rate of damage accumulation now exceeds the rate of repair. What makes this principle so powerful is that it is entirely reversible, at least in the early and middle stages. If you reduce the stress, if you allow adequate rest, if you give your body's repair mechanisms a chance to catch up, healing can occur. Vision that has been compromised by strain can often improve when the strain is removed. This is not a cure in the traditional sense, but it is a restoration of the conditions under which healing can happen naturally. The key insight is that you do not need to wait for disease to develop before you act. By understanding the principle of cumulative stress, you can intervene at any point in the process. You can reduce the daily stress load. You can give your eyes more frequent rest. You can optimize the conditions under which they work. And through these small, repeated actions, you can alter the trajectory of your aging. There is something profoundly empowering about the realization that awareness itself can alter the course of our health. This is not wishful thinking or positive psychology in the superficial sense. This is grounded in neurobiology, in behavioral science, in the actual mechanisms by which our nervous systems function and our bodies respond to the choices we make. When you become aware of a habit, when you truly see it for what it is rather than simply engaging in it on autopilot, something shifts in your brain. New neural pathways begin to form. New possibilities emerge. What was once invisible becomes visible, and what becomes visible can be changed. The human brain operates on two fundamental levels of consciousness. There is the automatic level, where habits live. These are behaviors so ingrained, so practiced, so familiar, that they require almost no conscious attention. You do not think about how to walk, you do not think about how to blink, or how to swallow, or how to adjust your posture. These things happen automatically, controlled by neural circuits that have been refined through repetition. This is efficient. It frees up your conscious mind to focus on novel problems and new information. But it is also dangerous, because habits that operate on this automatic level can persist unchanged for decades, even when they are causing harm. The conscious level is where intention lives. When you bring conscious attention to a behavior, when you decide that you are going to do something differently, you activate different neural networks. You engage your prefrontal cortex, the region of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and impulse control. You activate your anterior cingulate cortex, which is involved in attention and error detection. You activate your insula, which processes bodily sensations and awareness. These regions do not operate efficiently on autopilot. They require energy, they require focus, but they also have the capacity to override automatic behaviors, to create new patterns, to literally rewire your brain. This is where the habit of near-focus work without rest becomes particularly relevant. For most people, this habit operates entirely on the automatic level. You sit down at your computer, and hours pass without your conscious awareness. You pick up a book, and you read for extended periods without noticing that you have not blinked in minutes, that your eyes are dry, that your ciliary muscles are fatigued. The behavior is invisible to you because it has become automatic. But the moment you become aware of it, the moment you consciously notice that you are engaging in sustained near-focus work, that you have not looked away in 20 minutes, that your eyes feel strained, something changes. You have moved that behavior from the automatic level to the conscious level. Once a behavior is at the conscious level, you have choice. You can decide to look away. You can decide to blink deliberately. You can decide to adjust your lighting. You can decide to take a break. These decisions, made consciously and repeatedly, begin to create new neural pathways. Over time, as you repeat these new behaviors, they gradually move from the conscious level back to the automatic level, but now they are healthier automatic behaviors. Your brain has been rewired. Your habits have been transformed. The science of neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to form new neural connections throughout life, reveals that this process is not limited to young people. Your brain at 70 is just as capable of forming new neural pathways as your brain at 30, though it may require more repetition and more conscious effort. This means that you are never too old to change a habit. You are never too old to develop new awareness. You are never too old for your choices to matter. But awareness requires something more than simply knowing facts. It requires attention. It requires presence. It requires that you actually notice what you are doing in the moment, rather than simply moving through your day on autopilot. This is where intention becomes practice. When you decide that you are going to pay attention to your eye strain, that you are going to notice when you have been reading for too long, that you are going to consciously choose to rest your eyes, you are not just changing a behavior, you are changing your relationship to your own body. You are developing what might be called embodied awareness, the capacity to feel and sense what is happening in your physical form and to respond to those signals with wisdom and compassion. Practical wisdom is the bridge between knowing what to do and actually doing it. It is one thing to understand intellectually that you should rest your eyes, take breaks from near-focus work, blink more deliberately, and optimize your lighting. It is quite another thing to actually live this understanding, to integrate it into your daily life in a way that becomes natural, sustainable, and truly transformative. This is where practical wisdom enters, the ancient concept that the Greeks called phronesis, the capacity to know not just what is right, but how to apply what is right in the specific circumstances of your own life. Practical wisdom begins with understanding the why. When you know why something matters, when you grasp the deeper reason behind a recommendation, that recommendation transforms from a rule into a lived practice. You are not resting your eyes because someone told you to. You are resting your eyes because you understand that your ciliary muscles need recovery time. because you recognize that blinking is essential maintenance for your tear film, because you comprehend that the cumulative stress of years of uninterrupted near-focus work is what has compromised your vision. When you understand the why, you stop following rules and you start making choices that align with your own well-being. Practical wisdom also means meeting yourself where you are. You cannot overhaul your entire life overnight. You cannot suddenly transform decades of habit in a single day. But you can make one small change. You can set a timer to remind yourself to look away every 20 minutes. You can position your screen at arm's length and slightly below eye level. You can increase the brightness of your workspace. You can practice deliberate blinking, closing your eyes fully for a moment, allowing them to rest. These are not dramatic interventions. They are small, practical adjustments that fit into the reality of your life as it actually is, not as you wish it to be. Practical wisdom recognizes that consistency matters far more than perfection. You do not need to rest your eyes perfectly. You do not need to follow every recommendation flawlessly. You need to make these practices part of your life in a sustainable way. A small change maintained consistently over years will transform your vision far more profoundly than a dramatic intervention followed by a return to old habits. This is the truth that behavioral science reveals again and again. Small, repeated actions compound into significant results. Finally, practical wisdom means listening to your own body. Your eyes will tell you when they need rest. You will feel strain. You will notice dryness. You will sense fatigue. These are not signs of weakness. They are signals of wisdom from your body. When you learn to listen to these signals and respond to them with compassion and attention, you enter into a partnership with your own physiology. You become an active participant in your own healing and well-being, rather than a passive victim of aging. If this resonates with you, if you recognize yourself in what we have discussed today, I invite you to take action. Start with one small change this week. Notice your near-focus habits. Rest your eyes deliberately. Pay attention to what you feel. And then, share this understanding with someone you care about. Your parents, your grandparents, your friends. They may be experiencing vision loss that is entirely preventable. By sharing this knowledge, you give them the gift of awareness and choice. Thank you for being here. I am Dr. Martin Hale, and I am committed to helping you understand the science of aging so that you can live with greater clarity, greater health, and greater vitality. Please like this video, share it with those you care about, and subscribe to our channel for more insights into the biology of well-being and the practical wisdom that can transform your health.